today's conversation about women in tech. My name is Nelly Valinden. I will be your host today, and I hope everyone is doing well, staying safe, staying healthy. With March being the month of International Women's Day, what better time to talk about women in tech than right now? And to do so, I'm being joined by two amazing guests today, who are two women who work actually at the moment in the tech industry and have been doing so for a long time. I will introduce them to you in a second. However, before I do that, let me tell you what we will be talking about today. We'll take a look at some of the stats about women in tech. We'll look at the progress that has been made, or perhaps not so much. We'll zoom in on some great initiatives by organizations to boost the position of women in tech. And we'll also look at some blockers for progress, both in Europe and in the US. Now, as I said, I'll be doing that with two amazing guests, and I'll introduce them to you straight away. Joining us from the US, we have Carrie Gatz, who is CTO at Strategy.com. She's an international keynote speaker, and she also is a STEM evangelist. Now, for those of you who don't immediately know what the acronym STEM stands for, it means science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Carrie, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Great, thanks. How about yourself?
I'm good, thank you. Very much looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too.
And then we have joining us from Germany here in Europe, Meike Arendt, who is Managing Director at Seratai. And Seratai is a diversity partner for businesses in the entertainment and media industry. And they provide insights on equality and diversity to their clients. Meike, guten Mittag, as they say in Germany.
Yeah. Hi, nice to see you, Nelly.
Very nice to see you too, and welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Before we really get started with our conversation, let me give you a little bit of context as to women in tech as a topic, as this has been a topic for many years now. But yet, it seems sometimes that little progress has been made when you look at the data. One survey, for instance, from the UK says that women make up only 17%, that is 1/7 of the IT specialists in the UK. Worse even, a new survey says that the number of women in the tech industry has barely moved over the past 10 years, despite an industry-wide push. Now that raises the question, when tech has never had it so good, where are the women? And in the US, the situation is not necessarily that much better, as statistics suggest that only 24% of the people working in the tech industry are women, despite women making up for 47% of the labor force. Now, I think that's enough talking on my end, and I think we can dive in straight away by looking at some of the progress that has been made. Carrie, I'd like to start with you. And I wonder, in your view, has there been progress in female representation in the tech industry over the last 10 years? And if so, what has that looked like?
I think at some point there was. The problem we have right now with women in tech is that 5 times more women in the US have lost their jobs through COVID than men. And so that certainly affects the tech sector. There's also a recent study that said the attrition rate for women in tech is 67%, meaning that 67% of women that start in tech don't just leave their job, they leave tech completely. And so I think while there have been some strides and there's certainly been some good things, we definitely have a long way to go. And it's very difficult, I think, for some companies to really put a handle on that diversity piece right there, right? Because there's so many diversity, tracks that people are trying to go down. And it's not just women. Women are half the demographic, but certainly there's other demographics that people are trying to gain. And I think there's also sort of some misnomers that you have to write code to be in tech. And so that's kind of the only exposure that a lot of our young ladies are getting. And I think that makes it difficult because they don't really see those jobs in their frame of reference and see themselves in tech, when really there's everything from construction to the cloud is a possibility for jobs in tech. And so I think we have a long way to go for sure.
Yes, and so I think when you talk about the perception that perhaps women have about working in tech, I think there could be a role there as well for the educational system.
Oh, for sure,
right?
for sure.
Mm.
And the educational system has kind of changed. I mean, kids nowadays are growing up with devices in their hand. They automatically get, they just figure it's supposed to work, and they don't realize kind of what goes on behind the scenes to make that happen. And I think we can, as an industry, do a much better job. And actually, most of the industry groups that I work in have caught on, and we're all kind of doing the same thing. But the idea is to reach kids much younger and let them see these as potential career paths as they grow older, as opposed to, kind of the traditional things. I read a study that said that kids make up their mind what they're going to do by the age of like 6 or 7, and it's what they've been exposed to. So if they're not exposed to that, obviously it's not in their thoughts. And so I think we really have to do a better job of explaining all the careers.
And I think just to add there as well, I totally agree with what Carrie said, that we have the same situation here, that it's really the missing of women in tech just starts from the beginning, from university, from school and all that. So really where you have to start, and where I just see that I think it starts by the last 2 or 3 years, not earlier, that really what Carrie says is that you have to go to tell girls that they can code and that kids can code. And really it's so easy to show them when they're just like 5 or 6, just by playing. There's so many plays actually where you can easily start getting into this. So then the barrier is quite low then. But if you've never been in contact with something like this, or like really to do it yourself, then it's you're mostly there are a lot of biases then, where actually girls are held away from tech.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I do a mini recap here, then what you're saying, what I'm hearing is that yes, progress had been made, but COVID has not helped at all in that respect, which is of course worrying, I think. And then what we're saying on the other hand is that we need to try and find ways, probably both from the educational system as well as maybe from the industry, to expose girls at a much younger age actually at the possibilities that they can have working in the tech industry, and the fact indeed that everyone can code, right?
Yeah, totally.
Well, and and there's a lot of jobs that aren't coding in the tech industry too. So I think we really have to surround all of them.
Absolutely. So it's actually about creating more awareness from a young age.
I think so. Yeah, that's a big part of it for sure.
Definitely. Talking about this a little bit more. So you both have been in the tech industry for quite some time now. What have you changed in terms of the opportunities for women in tech, and also in terms of inclusion? Have you seen anything change? Meike, maybe I can start with you this time.
Yeah, for sure, we can do that. I would say there is a slight change, but as I said before, it's just like really going small baby steps in that case. So at Ceritire, for example, our chief product officer is the woman. So it's definitely possible that, and you see as well Carrie as a CTO, so it's definitely possible. But in my career so far, mostly it's really like there were mostly men in tech departments, and I think as well it's important to show and to see even more that, and to tell for example girls as well. It's like you can work with tech and in tech, you don't have to be like a complete IT specialist. So all the work we were doing and the way the work environment is changing, there's so many different aspects where you can work. You can work with data in tech and stuff like this. So it's not that you have to code if you don't want to. Like there's so many other possibilities. So just like I would say, don't be afraid, and just have a look if it's interesting for you.
Carrie, what's your opinion on this?
Well, I definitely agree. I also think that we do kind of a poor job of using tech to solve some of the problems of tech. So if you look at just culturally, women tend to step back and be the caregivers. And if there's a decision to be made in a married couple who has to leave their job, more often than not, it's going to be the person who makes less. And in the real world, we all know that women don't make the same as their male counterparts. And I think both of those areas are areas that we definitely need to work towards to fix that. We also need to sort it out so that men and women both get leave when a child is born. So that's not something, we won't hire the woman because she might take off, for some maternity leave. And if we hire a male, we don't have to do that. But I think the other thing, and really where the crux of all this is HR departments really have to get more creative. They have to be careful of the wording that they use in job descriptions. We have to really seek out women, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? So we've got all of these systems that go out and filter resumes for applications, and it all works off keywords. And if those certain keywords aren't in there, those resumes get scrapped. So what are you supposed to do if you're a hiring manager and your goal is to make 50% of your workforce women, for instance? How do you find those women, right? Especially if you can't tell from their name if they're a woman or not. And in a lot of cases, you have these recruiters that are telling women to go by initials or change their first name so that they don't stand out as women, which kind of defeats the purpose. And so I think that HR really has the ability to play a role. And I also think that, on my podcast, we have a hashtag that follows that, hire the person, not the paper. And, the idea there is that when women do drop out of college for caregiver reasons or whatever, normally they're in the workforce. And so we need to start valuing that year of work experience as much as we value a year of a university degree. And I think that will go a long way. You have companies like Apple now that are doing, skills-based hiring, and we're hiring people for their skills, not for the diploma that they may or may not have. And I think that'll be a huge difference because, in a lot of cases, that's really where women have had to drop out for one reason or another, either, because of pay inequity or caregiver duties. And we really need to be able to lift them back up into the workforce and give them equal opportunity. And it brings a diversity in there because there's a different diversity of thought. If everybody has a university education and everybody is taught to do the exact same things the exact same way, we have no diversity of thought in our departments, right? So I think it's important that you have that mix of skills, and sometimes just that kind of scrappy, been thrown into the fire, kind of sorting things out is a much better troubleshooting method. And it really leads to some of that problem solving that makes projects shorter and brings them together faster.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's beautifully said. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
I actually like to touch on COVID for a little bit, although, we've all heard so much already about COVID, but we already briefly mentioned it. So as you know, COVID and remote work have had a big impact on women at work. You already mentioned it, Carrie. And so according to a survey that has been held on the impact of COVID on work, 60% of women said that they did most of the activities related to house cleaning, compared to 47% of men. And 63% were responsible for homeschooling, compared to 52% of men. And then 54% of women had to change their work schedule more than their male partner to take care of the family. As a result, 50% of women believe that the effects of COVID-19 have actually hampered their overall career progression. Now, Carrie, you already talked about this a little bit, so I'm going to start with Meike first. But when you hear this, Meike, do you have any reflections on this?
Sadly, I have to say that I've heard a lot of this really from people in the surrounding as well. So there was a big discussion in Germany for sure that COVID brings us back to the 50s. And in some cases, I have to say, yeah, probably some parts of it, it's right. So actually what you say, I totally would agree. Yesterday I heard from another family where the mother stepped back to her hours because of homeschooling. And this is something that this is such a huge thing for COVID. It's so hard for families. So in that case, you mostly go back to old biases and old ways of working. So, and what Carrie said as well, like who's the one who's earning more money than the other one, which is mostly the women, is stepping back on hours. So all this is really stuff which in one case is really not bringing a progress, but on the other side, I would say some of COVID impact as well as homeschooling. So for the kids is perhaps making a difference, because now they see, okay, they working with computers. They're getting different schools. So I just could say it for Europeans. So school is changing for kids. So they're getting more self stuff. So they have to do more on their self. They have to be they have to work with all that video calls we are all doing. So kids from 5 or 6 years old, they have to do it themselves. So in that case, I think it's good to encourage young girls to see, okay, you could do this. It's like no problem. So it's not making a progress for the older ones, but I think it could change something for the younger generation coming back. And as well, kids see, okay, how is it back home? My mom is working, dad is working. How do they do it? So I think in the moment, I would say, yes, it's having a huge impact. And as well, for sure, it's if someone has to step back, it's mostly not good for women. But I really hope that it will make an impact for the younger generation and then change the way we have worked in the 50s from now on, and we'll have it different in the future.
Yeah, I really like what you were saying, Mike. Of course, I don't like the fact that somehow women who are working at the moment, they sometimes it's almost as if they go back to the 50s. But as you were saying that, I was thinking, okay, but how can there be something positive in all of this? And then you mentioned it actually, and I like what you say. And I think this may be partially also a good way for kids from a young age indeed to see the technology side of things and to indeed work with technology a little bit more, and maybe even by extension that they get some awareness about what it would be like to work in tech. So I very much like how you actually found this positive note to this, of course, mad situation. Carrie, what are your thoughts on this?
I would add a couple things. One, I think it is great for young kids as long as it works. If the kids find it frustrating, then I think we're having the opposite problem. But I would also say that I think that it's a huge opportunity for women. So historically, tech has done a really bad job of using tech to solve these problems. Like, why can't a mother work from home when her child is ill? It's a very simple solution, right? And so I think a lot of these companies that have had this, oh, absolutely, there's no way anybody's going to work from home. I think that has really gone away. And they've realized that certainly people can work from home, if not full time, at least sometime. You know, you see companies like Salesforce that are not going to require their people to come back to the office full time at all, because kicking and screaming, they figured out, well, people actually are working okay from home. And so for women, I think that's a huge opportunity. I also think that there's another opportunity for women that have had to move because of their husband's career. And maybe those tech jobs aren't physically sitting in that city where they now are located. I think this opens up a huge world. And I think since there's such a skill shortage in tech already, that this really presents, I think, a solution to a lot of those problems, but certainly opportunities for women that need to work remotely for whatever reason that is.
Yeah, definitely.
And one thing which is quite positive, just as I made the experience, in that case, we have to look at the men as well. So I had a lot of video calls where there were men who actually said, okay, yeah, there's my child and I have to look after my child because I'm at home as well. I'm the one now responsible for my, and as Carrie said, like who was before, okay, if you have to take a day off to look after your kids, mostly it's the mother, but now when everyone is home, it's like the dad is like much easier to get grip of for kids as well. So it's pretty normal that some kids are somewhere in video calls. They just apply it.
Well,
doesn't matter if it's for mom or dad.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because, 2 years ago, we would be mortified if a child ran in when we were on a Zoom call or a dog started barking, and now it's like, oh, hi.
Yeah.
You get to know the whole family. It becomes, there's a lot more humanity, I think, in jobs now because of all this home stuff.
Absolutely. I was indeed going to say, I think it makes us all a lot more human. And I think that's actually a good thing. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'd like to zoom in a little bit more on some of the blockers for progress. We already touched on some of them, of course, but what I'm really interested in here is the US perspective versus the European perspective, since we, of course, have the advantage of having both of you join us today. So, perhaps, Gary, I can start with you, because here in Europe, I think we always have this sense that when it comes to diversity matters, that the US is ahead of us. But what do you feel are some serious blockers still for companies that are stopping real progress?
I think one of the biggest blockers probably is HR and the HR systems. It takes a very active mindset to go after women. And we don't do as great a job, I think, as people think we do. We talk about it more, but once it becomes difficult, we don't necessarily use the tools available to us to solve that problem. And so, a lot of women can't relocate because their husbands are in jobs that make more money, or 85% of jobs in the United States are still filled through networking, not through the online where you go out and fill in your applications on all these sites. So if 85% of jobs are being filled through networking, who do people network with? They network with people that are very like-minded. They play golf together. They go have a few drinks after work. But it's not necessarily inclusionary of all the people that will be outside of their network, which is what brings that diversity to the table. And so that really active mindset and figuring out a way to make it work when it becomes difficult. Pay a relocation fee if you need to pay a relocation fee, or allow remote work and have somebody commute as often as necessary. You're saving on their office space, so a plane ticket here and there really is kind of nothing. But I really think that women need to do a better job of uplifting other women. Women need to do a better job of being sponsors for other women and bringing their name to the table when they're not there. And I would say men and women for that. And lastly, it's HR really has a responsibility, I think, and a role to make sure that all of these come to the table. And they've got to stop thinking in old ways. It's got to be less than you have to have a 4-year degree or we won't consider you, because half the time they're getting somebody with a 4-year degree and something that doesn't matter at all. And we don't consider the fact that, there's small little barriers. I was talking to a woman on my podcast actually the other day, and she started a foundation that doesn't do scholarship money, but what they do is emergency grants. So for instance, if a young woman has a job interview and can't afford to go to the other city, she can't afford that job interview. And so they make those emergency loans available to get them to the job interview, or to pay their rent while they're in the last semester of school, because, scholarship money doesn't cover that. And I think those are all areas where if we really are trying to uplift women and young people of color and young people of different backgrounds that really don't have the wherewithal, I think it's on all of us to really step up to the plate and start making those differences, because every little difference counts.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Carrie. I think you said some really interesting things there, and highlighted as well the important role that HR should play in this, among others. And I also very much like the initiative that you just mentioned, indeed, about how we can actually support women in this case then to even go to a job interview. I think that was a great example, and we'll look at some more examples later in our conversation. So Meike, if we look at the situation in Europe, I can imagine it's maybe similar, but are there some things that you specifically see in Europe as blockers for progress?
I think one specific thing which Carrie said is networking. And this is something which women in Europe have to learn a lot, because it's just what you see. It's like in Europe, I don't know if it's the same in the US, but in Europe or in Germany, it's like networking is like a big for male, but there are not so many networking groups for women where they really, what Carrie said as well, is just don't have the queen bee syndrome. Don't say, okay, I made it this way. I made it the hard way. I'm the only woman at the top, and that don't want to have others around me, but talk to other women, do networking as men do networking, because it is the way you could get jobs. And in a second step, for sure, it shouldn't matter that you just get jobs by networking, but you should get jobs by the way the person you are and the skills you have. I totally agree in that case. And I would say for sure it's HR department, but as well it's pretty important that the people hiring are just aware of the bias they have, and that they know and really have a look, okay, what is the person I'm looking for? I'm not looking for a specific person, but I'm looking for skills, and then really train the people who are hiring other people and who are doing the decisions, so that you're getting more diversity in that case, because we know that diverse teams work better and have much better output. And we just need to stay aware in all the hiring process just to get them on the table.
Yes, definitely. I think that's so true. I had this discussion also recently during a webinar with an analyst that did actually research to skills and also people's mobility within organizations. And I think that is a really important point, that we need to start thinking differently about hiring. And it's indeed also about someone's willingness to learn and someone's, he called it actually, we need to see what energizes people. And I thought that was really beautiful, because we do indeed need to see what energizes people, and then the skills that they need, and they can learn all that kind of stuff. We really need to start thinking differently about hiring, I think. And I very much liked what you said, by the way, Meike, about don't have the queen bee syndrome or something like that. I think that's a good one. But there again, I think HR could play a role in the sense that perhaps we can train people also when it comes to networking or when it comes to presenting themselves. I don't know what you think about that.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
No.
No, I do. I think that women as a whole, we're just not taught to brag about ourselves. We're not taught to celebrate our accomplishments. And every time you do, it kind of feels a little weird. It really does, because we're just not raised that way. We're not really wired that way. And when it comes to networking, part of that is just not having time. It's difficult to find the time when you are doing the cooking and the cleaning and taking care of the kids and working and all of that time. Now, when do we network? I think we as women have to set time aside for ourselves so that we can do those kind of things. I mean, it should be just as schedulable as whatever tasks we do at work, because I think it's important, for not only what we do ourselves, but to help others. And probably one of my favorite quotes, this came up on actually somebody else on a panel, and I forget who said the quote originally, but be the kind of woman who straightens another's crown without telling the world that it's crooked. And I think that just says it all, doesn't it?
Nice.
It's good.
Yeah, that was really good. I like it. Meike, did you want to add something?
I just initially said that really the networking thing is something which is in Europe totally underestimated. So we have to focus on this, and this is really something especially women have to learn. And when you're going for more diversity, you have to and this is something that HR has to support, that you're getting networks which are not just having the same people in there. Because then it's always, I'm replacing myself by someone who is like I am. And that's not the case we want to have. So to get more diversity, we have to get networks more diverse as well.
Absolutely. I'd like to talk a little bit about what, for instance, men who want to be allies, who want to be our allies in tech, what could they do? What could they actually do to help boost the position of women in tech? Perhaps we can take a look at some examples, if you know some examples. Meike, maybe I can start with you.
Yeah, for sure. So I think first of all, it's really important that they reflect their own thinking, their own behavior. So who are the people they have? They have hired so far. What is the way you're doing it right now? So asking for feedback, that's something which is really important. And then for male in general, I would say act the way you want others to act as well in that case. So if you want other young women in your team and you want to support them and you want to tell them it's no problem if they get a maternity leave and they can get back, then be the one who's taking a parent leave as well. Even if you're the CEO, just take your time and look after your family if you want to have the others doing the same. So be the forerunner in that case, showing this, what you're doing. And you have to seek then actively for people in your team who are not like you, and perhaps people who are completely different, and which makes work in the beginning a little bit more complicated for you because you cannot communicate that easy. But you will see that in the long run, a more diverse team is working better. So this is something which you have, or which men do in every way there. And I see there's some great people doing that, and more men really taking time for family, or saying, okay, I cannot take meetings on a Wednesday afternoon because this is kids' time. If a man is doing that, and even one in a really leading position, he's he's setting a sign and everyone else is doing that. So I've seen even more and more of this in the last years, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, of course. So it's about set the example that you want to see, be the role model, really. Carrie, I'm really curious what you have to say about this.
Well, I think a few things. I think one, if you're a male manager or you're really trying to build up that diversity, one, you have to get rid of some of those biases in your head, and you have to sort of think outside the box a little bit and realize that, if you have a room and a table full of people and the men continuously speak up, call on the woman. Ask her what she's thinking, make her feel included. See, there's a big difference between diversity and inclusion, right? If you build a diverse team and then you try to train everybody to be exactly the same, you've just lost the entire benefit of being diverse. Yeah. I posted a thing on LinkedIn a while back. It was a study on one of the studies on women in employment. And this guy said, why don't you just hire whoever you hire and let diversity fall what matter? What does diversity bring to the table? And I said, well, have you ever lost your car keys? And he said, yes. I said, and then you told your wife and she walked right up to him and picked him up? That's what diversity brings. It's somebody with a different thought process that can kind of, help sort things out from a different perspective. And honestly, companies that have that women leadership have shown a difference. So if you are a manager, you need to make sure that women get elevated to supervisory positions and that they have your support. And so a lot of that is really just being a sponsor and calling on them and making it understood that their opinion matters and helping them up and treat them like you would want to treat your daughter. I had another guy say, well, with this whole Me Too movement, I really don't want women on my team. How are you supposed to have a one-on-one coaching session when it could turn out to be something different? I'm like, have it at a restaurant. Have it in a conference room with glass walls or the door open, or there's a million ways to do that. But seriously, you're going to let what happened to some people probably very legitimately affect you. If you're worried about that, then maybe you need to look at your behavior and figure out, what you're so worried about, because most people are not like that. So I would just say that you need to really pretend that every woman in your employ is like your daughter, like somebody that you're trying to take an interest in their career, and then be that kind of advocate, be that kind of person, be a mentor, be somebody that imparts wisdom. Don't just tell the guys, and don't have meetings with all the guys when you're out drinking beer and the woman's not around. Make sure you include her. And I think that goes a long way, because when women start feeling excluded, they shut down. I mean, that's just what we do. We just don't gravitate to places where we feel uncomfortable. It's part of human nature. So that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah. Thank you. Actually, what I'm wondering right now when I hear you both talk, I think that could be an important role for us women actually to play here as well, right? We should probably also become more of an ally to other women, both inside and outside the industry. What are your thoughts on that, Maaike?
I think in that case, it's really important to support each other in that way. If you have or if you hear from something that there's a job opening, just have a look. Okay, who could be interested in that? Just send it to everyone. Well, no matter what kind of background that person has. So if it's men, women, ethnicity, whatever it's coming from, it doesn't matter. Just show it there. And as well, what I'm always trying to do, or trying as far as I'm working with younger women, then I try to be really open to them and say, okay, if you have any questions, anything what you want to have, where I can support you, just let me know. Just let us speak here and tell me what I could do in that case, just to support you.
Yeah. So, Carrie, you wanted to say something, Carrie. I was going to come to you anyhow.
No, I would just say I would go a little bit farther too, in that, especially in industries where there's not a lot of women, we're sort of pitted against each other like it's a competition. And it's really not a competition. Even if you compete with somebody, you should still be able to uplift them. You should, be able to have those kind of conversations and just be that sort of active supporting role. Like you said, it's not a competition. We're all in this together. And I will say this too. When you invest in somebody's career, they are a much better, much more loyal employee than if you don't. And so today, these kids that are coming out of school have massive amounts of college debt and they have no loyalty to their employer. The average tenure for a person in tech here in a job is 18 months. Because after 18 months, they're worth a lot more on the street than their employer gives them a little 3% raise for. And so jumping job to job is the way that you progress in the industry. That's a horrible way, because when you have turnover, it costs about $100,000 to recoup that employee. And so if you start with somebody and you really invest in their skills and you invest in their management skills and you take the time to make them understand the company's perspective versus their perspective and all of those things that a good boss should do, those people stay with you for a very, very long time. And so whether you're a woman in that role or a man in that role, I think, it's important. But I think for women, for sure, we've got to stop viewing it as a competition. It's not who can, I know some women that are real big on talking about women in the industry, but they also make some of the most ridiculously awful remarks to other women. And you think, if you could hear yourself talk, you probably would not be that way, because you shouldn't put other women on defense. You should be supporting them and lifting them up. And people, realistically, before there was a lot of universities, people learn skills in different ways. That's not the only way to learn. And, if you take somebody from outside the industry, you're going to have to send them to certification classes. You're going to have to do some on-the-job training. So why not just take a chance and start with that? Find somebody that that really wants to learn and really wants to be involved and help them get involved. They'll be much more loyal in the end.
Yes. For instance, in the form of a mentorship, right? We already talked about that. Yeah, exactly. Or coach, perhaps. Yes. Thank you both. Now, I want to look at something else, something positive. So I'd like to zoom in on some examples of what organizations are doing to help women in the tech industry. Perhaps you could share both some examples of that. Micah, I'm going to start with you again.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I think there's a lot of stuff going on now. So first of all, you're seeing that there's a lot of more really networks, women networks, going more and more in Europe here in the start, and want to encourage women. So I'm part of one of those women networks as well, where we're working as mentors as well, perhaps to encourage female founders, because female founders are really underrepresented in the German market. It's like, why? So we want to change something. So in that case, it's really what we said before. You have to support each other. Women have to support women. Another thing, which is even more and more, is that we have more and more organizations who are really looking for statistics. So what is going on? Is like, how big is the gender pay gap? And that is around 20% still in Germany. That's huge. So Germany is not really good in stuff like this. So we have to have someone who's always putting the finger there and showing, okay, you have to do something here. This is not good. So to try the communication there. And then the next thing, which I think is pretty cool, is stuff like Hacker School. So really what we had said, where they're going and teaching young kids to code. Just get a connection to tech. What is it, what you could do there? So get the barriers low. And still then some of the tech companies in Germany are really good as well in supporting parents, so especially fathers in that case. So make fathers being the light here to shine and to support. And as Carrie said, behave as you want your daughter to be treated.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm just going to recap quickly, because you basically mentioned three main things, like there's the women's network. So what's the name, by the way, of the network that you...
it's Mission Female. It's a German one.
Fantastic. Yeah, we just mentioned it, Mission Female. And then, of course, we have keeping track of the statistics and highlighting them, as for instance, when it comes to the pay gap that exists there, and make sure that people hear it and that they start doing something about it. And then the third axe that you mentioned was, of course, start with the young girls, with the kids, indeed. So those are, I think, already three really nice ways to go. Carrie, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so some of the companies here have actually allowed the women within those companies to start their own women's networking, and they support them, right? So it's one thing to say, yeah, I'm all for you going and doing all of these women things, but I'm not going to pay you to go to a conference to do that. I'm not going to, I'm not going to give you the time off. So there are some companies that are really, really working to attract young women, and they're getting involved with local Girl Scout troops and other things. And the company is actually giving them the time and the support to do that. So they might have like Ariaka, they're a security vendor, but they have a women in tech organization within their company. And so all of those women get to talk about different ideas and do things. So I think that's important. I think having women join professional associations and support the cost of those professional associations as a perk is definitely good, because then they get involved with women in the industry that have different perspectives from outside of your company, but they can bring that back as great ideas. And I think the last thing, and probably the most important thing, is listen, right? You have to have that open door, no judgment policy where women can come talk and really sound things out. And, it's important to have that support system, I think, throughout the entire management structure of your company to make it, accessible.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, unfortunately, I see that we are reaching the end of our time today. But before I'm going to give you a big thank you, and before I'm going to let you go, perhaps we can finish with maybe, what's your hope for women in tech for 2021? What's your biggest hope for them, 2021 and beyond? Carrie, I'm going to start with you for this one.
I would say that I hope remote work and the current climate is much more advantageous for women, and that more companies really see the advantage of having women in their workforce and use some of the tools available. And then I would also leave everybody with a challenge, and that is to make a difference to one woman, because it pays forward and it will go on.
I like that. So Mike, I'm going to add that to you as well. So first of all, what's your biggest hope? And then indeed, what would be your challenge to leave people with?
I would say my biggest hope really is that we will see a change of the work surrounding and women in tech in the next year. For every baby steps we will see there, I will be really, really glad to see them. And one thing is, I want to say to the young women especially, just take your seat at the table. Just don't be shy. Just do it in that case, and to show yourself. Don't judge yourself before you do anything.
Nice one. Thank you very much. Okay, and before I really gonna let you go, Carrie, perhaps if people want to connect with you, where can they best do that?
I'm always happy to connect on LinkedIn. The last name is Goetz, or you can reach me on my website, www.strategicom.com.
Okay, thank you. And Mike, if people want to connect with you, where can they best do that?
I would say as well, go to LinkedIn. You will find me at LinkedIn. And as well, if you want to see something more about diversity in the media, you could just visit Sarah Ty's website, and I'm happy to talk about that all the time.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you both so much for joining us today. And I personally really enjoyed the conversation that we had. I hope you did so too. So thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Meike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for watching this video and listening to this conversation. Bye.